So, about that remake. I have mixed feelings about the idea. On one hand, I am just biased. This miniseries is an old favorite of mine, and these actors perfectly represent these characters in my mind, and it's just really hard to imagine anyone else playing them. On the other, there was a lot left out of the book, mainly due to budget constraints, and it would be kind of nice to see a movie attempt some of that stuff. That said, my reactions to the trailer still have me sitting firmly on the fence. On one hand, what little we can see of the child actors, they seem great. Their dialogue is really natural sounding, and it seems like they chose good actors. Speaking of which, I noticed that the girl who is obviously Bev has kind of a Molly Ringwald vibe, which got me thinking about the fact that I bet the first movie is going to take place in the 80s, which makes sense. At this point, the late 80s is about 30 years ago. God, I feel old. If that's the case, I will miss that 1950s aesthetic, but it does make sense to update it. I'm also not sure how to feel about the fact that apparently the kids' scenes are completely their own movie instead of being shown in a series of flashbacks, meaning that the adult versions of them won't show up until the second movie, so there's no wraparound story that involves Mike calling everyone back. I mean, I guess it can work, it's just hard to imagine. Also, going by what I've seen in the trailer, I'm not sure how I feel about Pennywise. Basically, Pennywise should not look scary by default. Despite some people having a fear of clowns, traditionally clowns are not meant to be scary, and Pennywise ought to reflect that. Of course, Pennywise can be scary when he wants, but when he's trying to lure a little kid into his clutches, scary is the last thing he's gonna want to be. Here's an interesting detail about the design of Pennywise in the miniseries. In subtle ways, they made him look like he obviously wasn't just a human in makeup. Like, the big red nose has nostrils in it, and it kind of blends into his face. He has kind of a big bulbous head, and his hair, despite looking like fake frizzy clown hair, appears to be growing out of his head. It looks like the remake is taking that idea a bit further. I noticed that the hair especially is a more natural red color, and he looks like he has a receding hairline. And that's interesting, but I feel like they're taking it a bit far with toning down the colors. I'm also not a fan of some very modern horror tropes I'm seeing, like at one point he's moving really fast like the film is sped up and he's jerking his head around like a Silent Hill monster. Though, I have to admit I am kind of curious where they're gonna go with all of this. Of course, by the time this video goes up, the movie will already be out, and probably all of you have seen it by now. But at the time I'm making this video, it's not out yet, so all I can do is speculate. So I guess you can tell me if my fears were justified or not. It is getting good early reviews, so I'll probably see it eventually, and with the different time periods, maybe I can set it apart from the miniseries enough to think of it as its own thing and get past that bias I have.